Hi, this is Dr. Collada, and this is your first week lesson, discussion, and homework video. So the first thing I'd like to say is that there are 5 chapters that are required readings. However, I really want you to focus on chapters 1 through 4. That really covers HTML and cascading style sheets and a little bit about the internet and the World Wide Web. We'll get to a lot more on JavaScript after we finished our discussions on cascading style sheets and HTML. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that it's helpful to just do a skim through it. JavaScript is an interpreted language, and it's a little different than Java. Java is a compiled language. Many of you have taken Java as a prerequisite to this course, or maybe even C# or another language. We're actually working on client-side programming. So all of our programming is done in the browser and in text in a text editor. So it's going to be easy to code it and also to do some debugging. Now, I did want to talk to you that first homework reading, chapter 1 and 2, are very light and they should be pretty easy reads. So I don't have very many notes on those chapters. I did highlight that Tim Berners-Lee is the one who created the World Wide Web and HTML and HTTP, which is the protocol that we use to retrieve web pages through the internet. HTML is the language. It's a markup language used for us to enable us to identify how we want to mark up or lay out our content that we're putting on our page. He's also the current director of the World Wide Web Consortium. That is the organization that maintains our web standards. It's located at w3.org. And you'll find that the web browsers are going to be very important as we talk and view our web pages, but there are a lot of other technologies used today. Content managed systems like WordPress and Wix are very popular, but we're going to work on code to help you become a better developer. Not just an end user. So, chapter 2 is going to help you get ready for that. It'll talk to you about selecting your browser and editor. We've already told you that we'll be using Visual Studio, but Komodo is actually a nice program. So is Adobe Photoshop. I use a lot of the Adobe products as well, but these products cost money. Visual Studio actually also would cost you, except for the fact that as a student you can get that for free in class. So again, I encourage you to download and install that. There are some additional technologies mentioned like Node.js. Node is used, again, on the server, and we're going to limit our coding to just the client side. So we'll be only focusing on Bootstrap. And so we'll talk a little bit about jQuery and jQuery UI, but most of the time we'll be working with Bootstrap, style sheets, and basic JavaScript. Chapters 3 and 4 get into HTML details as well as cascading style sheet. These 2 chapters are really important for you to know. There are a lot of issues that come up in the class, especially on the final exam, and certainly if you review these sections, I think you'll do much better on those exam questions. So do take a look at them. As we go through the homework, I'll be pointing out some of the concepts that are discussed in these 2 chapters. But those 2 chapters are extremely important readings for you today. One of the things I thought we would do is go through the discussion and homework, and then we'll come back and talk about the lesson in a little bit more detail. The discussion itself shouldn't take you more than 15 or 20 minutes tops. It really is looking at analyzing websites, and I know that you've just started to learn HTML and cascading style sheets, but this is going to give you some more experience, and as you look at other people's code, other people's websites, this is how you will learn about what are good techniques and not good techniques. Now, the idea here is we're doing analysis, and we're trying to evaluate whether or not the website is good, bad, ugly, look at their coding, seeing if there's any issues that might be popping up. So I'm going to have you visit a website called webpagethatsuck.com. It's actually a book that came out many, many years ago. I have the original book that's out there. And one of the cool things is that he actually does look at different websites. Now, he's not really up to date. Most of the sites ended in 2015, but they're nice because some of these websites have never been updated. Sometimes just being mentioned in this list actually got people prodded to change their design. So it's kind of nice to see a before and after. In many cases, he does a screenshot so you can see what the before looked like. So I picked a website that really is not very good called the Oceanside High School. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one up for you. Oh, there it goes. All right, I turned off my volume because it's really annoying. What you'll find here is that hopefully I can stop that. Nope, I can't even stop that. Isn't that terrible? So we're going to go ahead and hopefully my output for my speaker is off, and hopefully you can still hear me. So what we're going to do is take a look at this site. The top part is part of a frame, and it's the header of the frame. The left is this menu section, and the right is the content area. The way that this typically works is you clicked on something and it updated the content area. The problem that we have about this is that frames are no longer supported. They're actually deprecated, which means that they're obsolete and no longer part of the standards. And yet it's still being used, which tells me that this website has not been updated in quite a while, or that the person updating it really doesn't understand what the new standards are. Over on the left-hand side, you'll notice that, again, this works independently of the rest of the page. It's because it really is a different page. Every page is independent of the other, and then we have one global page that we put the entire frame within. Let me go ahead and take a look at the source code and show it to you. So up at the top, you'll see that I have a HTML tag at the top and I have one at the bottom. The HTML tag is the root tag for the entire web page, but I wanted to show you what the skeleton of a page looks like. This is the W3 Schools website, and if you scroll down in this first example, you actually see the skeleton of a web page, and that's important. At the top, you see there's a doc type that tells you which version of HTML you are using. There's actually multiple versions of HTML. There's HTML 1, 2, 3, which is really 3.5. There's version 4. There's version which we call 4.01. And then we have version XHTML, and then we have version 5. And so if you see this doc type and it just says pure old simple HTML, you know that you're good to go, that you're using HTML5. If they're missing HTML, then chances are they're using an older version like HTML4. So if you see anything else extensive like that, the easiest way is to take you out to the w3.org site, and you're going to look at HTML, and we're going to use w3.org, and we're looking for doc type. And if you go out and take a look, you can use your editor, or you can go out anywhere you like. I'm going to go ahead to, well, we'll take it from the W3 Schools. That'll be fine. Here you go. This is the list of doc types on the W3 Schools. Notice that anything other than HTML5 is this lengthy red string, and it's telling you the different versions. So here's HTML version 4, and here's the version XHTML, and that's about it. So the idea here is that we can identify the version of HTML, the standards that we're going to use, by simply looking at the source code of our page. So the second thing is he has a head section identified with the head tag and a closing tag, but he doesn't have the second section. The second section of the page is the body tag. The body tags that are shown here are nested inside of a frame set, and that's not what we want. What we want is what's shown here. We want an HTML tag, and then we want our body tag inside. Now really, I'm going to go ahead and take you to a page to show you how it should be written, like this. And closing head. There you go. This is called the skeleton of the page, where you have a head section and then you have a body section, and all that is nested inside of the HTML root element, R-O-O-T, root element. Now, the head section is used for putting things like links to files. It is about meta tag data about your web page. It has the title that is going to be displayed in the title bar and in the bookmarks and history. The body of the page is the actual content. So here where it says my first paragraph and my first heading, that is the content that's actually going to be displayed in the page itself. So I call that the skeleton because every page should have that basic structure of the page. All right, so that's important to know. Now, as we take a look at his source code again, you'll see in his head section, he does have some metadata. He has the title, which is going to appear in the title tab up here in the browser, so it appears nicely. It'll also appear in your bookmarks and history. Again, it won't appear in the page, it'll just appear in the title. It also has the keyword and descriptions from the meta tag. That's very helpful. Even though browsers don't completely rely on those anymore today, they still are very important. So you should always include keywords in description. What it does also include here is a generator. And the generator is the editor that's being used to create or modify this page. He's using Microsoft Front Page, which is a pretty old product. So we know that this page was created quite a while ago. Again, if it's Dreamweaver or another editor, you might see information that might lead you to that idea. As we go forward, I will kind of give you some clues. But again, I'm going to kind of let you try to sift it out for yourself as you view your different web pages. And then down here in the body, where the body should be, you have the frame set. And again, the frame set's deprecated. It shouldn't be used anymore. So how do I know this? Well, let me go ahead and take the code from the website, that URL, and I'm going to a website called validator.w3.org. And what's really nice is you can either upload a file, you can copy and paste the code, or you can validate it by just simply passing the web page address. I'm going to pass that address right there in the text box and click on check. And it's going to list you all the errors in the page. So notice that it says there's 20 errors. But most of the errors really have to do with the fact that they're using frames. And so it's having trouble because it doesn't have a doc type, so it doesn't identify that. And it's also having trouble because of the frames that are not supported, along with the different attributes. So many of the attributes he's using just simply are no longer supported. Now, if I really wanted to, I could come back here and I could view the frame source of this middle section of the page. So notice that in the middle of the section of the page, he has that head section, but all the content area, he has no body tag. So there is no body tag at the beginning, and there should be a body tag at the end. And yeah, he does have a body tag at the end, but look where his body tag is. It's towards the bottom. So he definitely has some issues here. He's using a older attribute for the background of the page. And again, browsers will let it work, but it doesn't mean it's in the standard. He's using font tags that are deprecated. He's using B for bold when we should be using style sheets. He's using color for the color of the font when we, again, should be using style sheet rules. So you could tell pretty much that a lot of what he's doing is old. So I can go ahead and put that back into my URL in my validator. And again, just the web address, not the source, just the actual page. And put that in there. And you can see he's got 129 errors. Again, no doc type. He's going to have an issue because there's no body type. A lot of attributes are incorrect. Either they're missing, they're not specified for images, the alternative text. He's using center. Some tags are closed, some tags are open. He's using table tags inappropriately. Again, a lot of common issues. And again, issues with the body tag. So this is what I want you to do. Check it out. Look at the code. Notice that in his code, it's really hard to read. He's got indentation, but there's no comments. So it's hard for me to tell when does the table start, when does it end. Here he's got the div tag after the table. So it's kind of hard for me to match up this tag right here with this div tag. And when you're looking at this much code visually, it helps to have that alignment. You can see that there's a TR tag here and a closing TR tag here. So you can draw an imaginary line between them, and you can see there's an opening and a closing tag. Here's an opening tag, here's a closing tag. Here's an opening tag, here's a closing tag. When you put them at the end of the tag over here, at the end of the line, it becomes much harder to see where that nesting is happening. Same thing, the P tag is nested inside of this TB. This is a cell tag. This is a table cell. And it really should be indented. So the problem I have here is that he's having trouble indenting his code correctly, and I also then question his nesting. So again, he has many issues. Even here, if you notice the font that he's using here, he's also using the bold tag and the I tag. And really, we should be using either cascading style sheets or the new tags, one's called strong for bold and one's called EM for emphasis instead of italic, because they do have different meanings in the system today. So again, don't look at old websites. Don't look at the old Stack Overflow, because often those web pages will give you this old code and it will actually cause you more harm in the long run. So that's one of the reasons I'm having you look at it. This page is just for fun. So when we look at web pages, we look at a lot of things. Look at how busy it is, look at the background colors, look at the fonts that are being used, look at the purpose, the intention of the content, the layout and design. Is the navigation easy to use and consistent across the entire site? But this site I brought in, I always bring it for fun into a site. It's extremely busy. It's way busy. But it's kind of a fun page because this person made $1 million. He sold every pixel on this page for $1 and eventually got $1 million. So it may be busy and it may be ugly, but it certainly had its purpose. And I think that's the key, is that there's a balance. We want really good designed layout, but always balance what the purpose of the site is and what it's going to be used for and who your audience is. So there's a lot of examples of good sites and bad sites today. So always look within the context of your purpose of your site. So what you would write then is you'd write out description of the problems that they had in the page, maybe the naming properties of the elements, talk about the nesting and the white space and the line wrapping. What editor do they use? Are there issues with the meta tags? The color, the code might actually help you identify errors. Are they using any JavaScripts in their code from other websites? Again, just talk about what you found and what you learned about their code. Their documentation and their meta tags, are there any issues with that? And then validate it. Go out to the W3 and validate it and review it and tell me if there's any major errors. Are there many common themes that are out there? What version of HTML are they using? How did you identify that? And then maybe discuss why you would pick, which version of HTML would you pick. There are different reasons that are talked about in Chapter 3 in your book. So again, review Chapter 3 where it talks about versions of HTML, and that'll help you with that. Now, there's no right or wrong on this except for not to do it. So I want you to do a good job in thinking and being critical about the website. And then you're going to do a reply. The reply should actually, a student should actually go visit that website, should review your code and your page and your comments, and then do a critique. And, help each other say, hey, do you agree with the other student? What was wrong? Maybe are they missing something? Again, trying to have a conversation about the material that you're discussing. So the grading criteria that I'm looking at is, are you helping each other to evaluate and analyze the data as well as the code and your documentation and coding conventions used? That's what I'm looking for. So have fun with it. Again, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes tops. It should be a fun activity. All right, now, the next assignment you're going to do is your homework assignment. And your homework assignment, once you have kind of looked at code, you're going to actually be able to make your own website. So we're going to start by actually creating the structure for your website. You're going to be creating for the entire class period for the next 8 weeks, one website. So each week you will add pages and files to that website. That's an important concept. One website. It's not going to be posted on a live server. You're going to store it locally. You're going to create a folder, and inside of that folder, that's where you put all your subfolders and resources. Now, the theme of it is going to be a local community nonprofit organization that sells rummage sale items. And I chose that specifically because some people want to focus in on something specific. It gives you a wide variety of ways to go with your website, and so everybody's website will be very unique, which is really great. Now, the second thing is that you'll need to use your Visual Studio and set up the website structure. So, you'll need to create a folder called CS240 _ and then last name. And I do that because I want to be able to easily recognize your folder when I download it. So you'll need to create that basic folder, and you'll need to create some subfolders. pages will be used to store your web pages. Your images, for your image folder, you'll need a JavaScript folder, a CSS folder, and a fonts folder. And you'll have an additional folder called homework that you can also store your Word document files that you'll need for your solutions. So what we're going to do is I'm going over to my Windows. I like to go out to my File Explorer, and I like to do this part in File Explorer because it'll be super easy. In my desktop, you're going to create a folder. Now I've created one called CS240_Smith, but I'm going to, for this example, create one called CS240_Jones. And Jones will be the demonstration that we do in class. Inside of that, we could create our subfolders here. So I could create a subfolder called Pages for our web pages. I can create one called Images. And I can create one called JavaScript. All right. There we go. Fix it up. JavaScript. Okay. But I'm not going to create all of them here because I want to also show you that you can create them inside of Visual Studio. But always create the very first folder. Create it in your parent folder inside of File Explorer. It's a lot easier. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Visual Studio. I've already opened it up. I'm going to click File, Open, and then select Website. And then all you need to do is locate your folder, this Jones folder, and select Open. That's it. The only mistake that you can make is if you go to the File menu and you select Project. We are not working with projects. So when it says Open or New and it says Project, don't select Project. We are not working with projects. We are working with Website. So you'll notice that the files of the folders are all set for you. If you want to add more, as I said, we want to have a cascading style sheet folder. Simply right-click on your project over here and select Add, and then select New Folder. Just take a second. There you go. Add New Folder. We need one for CSS, and we'll definitely need one for homework. And New Folder. We'll call it Homework. So it looks like we have most of them. Looks pretty good. Okay. Now, so we've got CSS. Oh, we should have one called Fonts. And that's where we'll add any additional fonts that we're going to use. There you go. Okay, so that's easy. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a single page called home.html. And again, we're going to create that, and we're going to create week 1.1.html and week 1.2.html. And we can create other pages for the rest of the class, but let's go for the most part and just do the first couple. So we're going to create home.html. So to do that, in your pages folder, just go ahead and click on it to select it, right click on it and select Add, and notice that you have some options right here. You have HTML page already in the list, and you have Add New Item. I'm going to go ahead and select HTML page, and I'm going to go ahead and select the home, and I'm not going to put the extension. Okay, it already knows I'm making a web page, so all I have to do is type in home, and it'll go ahead and put that in there for me. There. Now you notice it's going to appear right underneath my pages folder. That tells you it's inside of that pages. You can expand and collapse. You can also take a look at it. It's open up in my editor right here. And you can see it put the skeleton already into my page, which is terrific. Now we need to create 2 more pages. So I'm going to right click on my pages folder and I'm going to select Add. But I want to show you a different way to do it so that you have an idea later. I'm going to click Add New Item, and you're going to see that there's an Add New Item dialog window. And HTML is just another kind of file. There are many different kinds of files we can use. I'm going to select HTML page, and I'm just going to change this to week 1-1.html. So again, it doesn't matter which way you go, except for the fact that if you do it this way, you do have to put the file extension in. And I remind people that because what happens is if they don't remember that, sometimes you'll see it add it as .html, 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 and we really don't want that. We only have one file extension. So I'm going to add my second page, just simply week 1-2.ht. I don't need that. Okay. All right, so now I've got my 3 pages created for this week. And if you want to go ahead and do all the rest of them for the rest of the weeks, that would be fine. So you could come in here and add a page for week 2-1 and 2-2. Again, the point of it, it helps you create it quickly and so forth. Okay, so notice as they all open up, we can go ahead and close them. We don't have to have them all open at one time. All right. So we have finished with the first part. In the second part, we need to actually modify the content in week 1-1. We need to display information about our product and company, and we're going to be selling pens this year. And so the first week we'll be selling pens, and the other weeks you can sell whatever you like. So we need to have some sort of description for the product that we're going to sell, and we need to create a hyperlink to the second page, and we need to insert a hyperlink to another website. So the minimum that you need is to write up a description. So we're going to work on week 1-1 first. Sometimes as I'm working, what I will do is up at the top or at the bottom, I will just simply do a quick comment like that, and I'll put some, I'll paste my my comments there. So just as I'm going through my assignment, it's very easy to find out what we're going to do. So I've already modified the page. I have to display information about product and company. So let's do a couple of things. I'm going to add like maybe a heading tag or something of a description. We have to then add a short link, and then we have to create a hyperlink, and then create a hyperlink to the second page. All right, we're going to take a break for a second. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm opening actually a second website with the solution so that you can see what it looks like. Everyone's going to have different solutions. Your page will be a little different than somebody else because you'll have different products and images that you'll be working with. But I'm going to go ahead and open this so you can see one way to solve this problem. And in my pages, in my week 1, okay, we're going to open up that, and we're going to open up home. So the first thing I did was I wanted to show you a little bit about HTML. So I think what we'll do is we'll go into the home page first like I did before, and we'll just modify that. So what I did was inside of the title tag, I put something. I put down Rooster's Rummage Sale because my store is called Roosters. That's going to be shown in the tab up at the top of my page. So that's important. And down below, I added some H tags. The H tags are heading tags. They're used to display information in your page. Now, I also like to put comments in there. Now, the one thing I'll remind you that if you're going to put comments, make sure you do it here underneath the HTML tag. You can put down your name. You can also put down the date modified. You know, August 20th, 2017, wherever it happens to be. So the idea here is that you can put comments at the top of the page. You can put also comments anywhere you want on the page. Now when you're all done, notice that there's a little asterisk here. That asterisk means that the page is not saved yet. So you can click on the little save icon at the top, and that will save your page, and that little asterisk will go away. When you're ready and you like the way your page looks in terms of your code, simply right-click on the page and select View in Browser. Now, I'm using Microsoft Edge. It's the default browser, but you can use Chrome or Safari. And notice it'll come up and it'll display the text in different sizes. The H1 tag is the largest font tag for the heading. That's why you see it large here. And the H2 tag is slightly smaller. You'll also notice that up at the top, it's actually running it through a local web server called localhost. This gives you an idea of what the page might look like on a real site, even though we're using client-side coding. You do get to look at it as if it was on a server. So keep that in mind as you go along. So again, it's a nice way to preview your pages. Now, so that's basically what we're going to be doing. We'll be adding some content to our head section, and sometimes I'll be adding content to the body section. And the body section is what's going to be viewed in your web page. So let's take a look at this week 1.1. So the way I approached 1.1 is, again, I put some comments at the top. It says it's created by the person who created it, the date they created it. This would just simply change that to update it. There you go. Again, the page name, depending upon what I'm working with, I might actually write out the name of the page. And I might put on additional information if there's additional notes that are important. So again, the idea here is your documentation should be of interest and important for your coding. Now you'll notice at the top of the page, in addition to the title, I added a section called Style because I wanted to make some style rules to make my page look good. And I'll go over that in a minute. And then I have this body section. Notice that in the code, in Visual Studio, it gives you this really cool ability to collapse all these different rules and all these different sections of code. So every time there's a beginning tag and an ending tag, we can collapse our code. And I can go ahead and collapse the style sheet completely. And I can also completely collapse the head. So you can see I've got the head section and the body section, and we can be working on one section at a time, which is really great. Now, for fun, I'm going to go ahead and comment out my style section completely so you can see what the page is going to look like without any style rule. So we'll look at how ugly it's going to be first. There you go. Okay, so in this main section, I have a heading, a big heading for the title of the page, and a smaller heading. And then I have some paragraphs. The first paragraph talks about when I open the doors, and the second paragraph talks about pencils, and then we talk about a little bit about the company in the third paragraph, and the P tag is just simply used for paragraph. And then down here, we have a paragraph where I want to bold something. So I'm going to use the strong to bold something. And then I'm going to use a span tag because I want to modify some color. So when I write the word blue out, I want it to look blue. So inside of that, I'm going to add a special tag called the span tag. And what the span tag does is it lets me actually, I could do this for a single character, I could do it for a word, I could do it for a couple of words, but it helps me to identify content, a small amount of content, and not add any carriage returns or anything like that. It's not going to insert anything. It just says, hey, go out and get this content, and then apply whatever styles I want. In this case, I want to apply the color style. So I'm going to use this style attribute, which allows me to identify a style rule. And the style rule that I want is color. And I'm going to use a hexadecimal value to represent my color because there are 16 million colors, and there's no way we can have names for all of them. So we're using a hexadecimal color that represents the amount of red, green, and blue that we have in our value for the color. And so I'm going to go ahead and I picked out a real pretty blue I liked, a purple, a black, a green, and I even picked a pink color that I want to display. So again, you can use span tags to identify small sections of your code that you want to configure. And then I have a section called a footer section because I have lots of tags, and sometimes it helps to have groups of tags. So I have a group of tags called a footer. I also have tags called header that I can use if I have a heading section. But the idea is that it just groups other tags for me. And so in this footer section, I want a line break, and this line break is just simply created with a break tag. Notice that most tags have a beginning tag and a closing tag. There's a beginning footer and a closing footer, a beginning paragraph and a closing paragraph, a beginning span, a closing span, a beginning strong, and a closing strong. Well, with line break, we don't have that. It's just a void tag. It doesn't have an ending tag. So we use a forward slash at the end just to represent that, hey, this has no closing tag. That's all it is. Same thing with the horizontal rule. That's kind of a horizontal line across your page, and I can also identify that with a forward slash because there is no closing HR tag. And again, this just makes a vertical or horizontal line across your page. And then again, here's another paragraph, here's another paragraph, and here's another paragraph. Now, notice that inside of this paragraph, I wanted to put some hyperlinks for people who maybe didn't know our menu system or needed to get to different pages. So I'm creating my hyperlinks. I'm making my menu very simple. They're made with what's called the anchor tag, and the anchor tag has several properties. One of them is href, which tells you what is the path to locate that item, in this case a web page. The path can be relative or absolute. In the first two examples, they are relative, meaning that they're in the same folder structure. In the third one, I'm actually sending it to an absolute address. That means that I'm using the protocol HTTP, and I'm identifying the exact website that I'm going to go to and or web page that I want to visit. So again, this one is going to go to an outside resource. The first two are going to go to pages that are inside my own website. So these are going to be in the same folder, the same directory. As we go forward, you're going to see that there are other things like tab index and title and target. Tab index is used again for people who are on disabilities or they need to tab between elements on the page using their keyboard. Title is often used again when you mouse over an element, or in some other special browsers they might use the title as well. The content of what is displayed in the page is always going to be between the first anchor tag and the closing anchor tag. So often this is text, it could even be an image, but the content between those two tags, the beginning and the closing tag, is what's displayed in the page. That's an important concept. And then after the link, I have a couple blank spaces. Now, web pages don't care about white space, so hitting the space bar 10 times or 20 times isn't going to work. It only recognizes one blank space at a time. So what we want to do is I wanted a second blank space. So I added it using a non-breaking space shortcut, which is this little character entity. It begins with an ampersand and ends with a semicolon. And there's character entities for other kinds of things, like down here. I've got one for copyright, so it shows the copyright symbol. There's all kinds of character entity lists that you can look up and that are in your book. But the blank space and the copyright are very commonly used, and you should definitely know what this is for the final. Now, as you go forward, I have 3 of these links, so I've 3 of them over here. And then down below in the other paragraph, I have some text down here. It's written in French, and actually I did write a translation down here. So just a cute little phrase. And notice that I have a class and a lang attribute. The language is simply identifying what language this is. In this case, it's French. We can actually identify the language for the whole page. These days, if you go to Google, Google will actually translate your web pages for you, which is terrific. But we can also use this information later if we want to identify what language a particular piece of content is. We also have what's called a class. It's like a variable. It's a way of representing what style rule do we want to use to format that particular content. So I created a class called italic because I'm actually going to italicize this particular content. But you could call these variables, these classes, whatever you like. These classes are identified in your style sheet, and I'll show you how you write those in a few minutes. And then my last sentence I have here, I'm using the code tag inside of my paragraph because I want to actually show this in kind of a fixed font width, and it's going to be like a Courier, which is almost like a computer type font. So again, as you go forward, you're going to see that there are lots of tags we're going to learn, there are lots of attributes we're going to learn, and there are going to be lots of classes and style rules that we're going to be learning in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And this is a good overview of what a basic web page looks like. Now again, I have a little asterisk, so I'm going to need to save it before I move forward. And then I'm going to right-click on it and view it in the web page. Simply view it in the browser. All right, so now here is my web page. It doesn't look really pretty yet. That's fine. All the text is kind of stretched out, and as I move backwards and forwards, that will stretch in and stretch out. That could be a good thing, especially for responsive designs when we have mobile phones and things like that. But I really want to kind of fix it a little bit, so I'm going to show you how to center the content in the page, as well as how to maybe put some color into it and make it look a little nicer. Notice that our color of the text is showing up, and we have 3 links at the bottom. And if I click on it, this link actually will launch pens.com in another tab in our browser, because I told it to do that by, in the code, setting an attribute called target. So right here, when I said target equals blank, that meant that it will open it up in a brand new tab. So that's why it does that. I could also go to week 2 by just simply clicking on that and then clicking back. Okay, I'm already on the week 1-1. I could also go back to my home page as well. So let's go ahead and show you how we're going to style this, and then we'll move on to week 1.2. So what we want to do is let's take a look at the solution, and then we will go ahead and show you how it looks. So this is how it's going to look. This is the wrong one. We need Smith. Oh, I commented the wrong one out. Okay, so let's go ahead and uncomment the style rule. There you go. Okay, go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and preview. There you go. So what we have done is we have changed the background to be blue. We've changed one of the headings up here to be blue. We have changed the product description. It is bolded with the keyword strong. We've got a nice horizontal rule. It's got a nice color. And down here, notice everything's centered. We've got some italicized text, and we've got this font down here that is showing you it is a Courier font, a fixed font, and it has the nice copyright symbol here. And we've got some nice blank space between these pipe symbols to make it look a little easier to read. So it's a basic web page. It's, again, just showing you some text and how you can modify the page quickly by just using style rules. So let's see what the style rules look like. So the first one right here is the body tag. And what I find often is if I use comments, I can go through the examples and show you how they work quickly without actually, there you go, without implementing them all at one time. So I'm going to open them up one by one. Notice that I'm just simply putting some comment symbols. The comment symbols in HTML are different than in the style tags. The comment in the web page would be a greater than sign and less than sign with the exclamation point and the 2 hyphens, like that, something like that. And a lot of times what I would often do is I comment not only the major sections of the page, but I might also do something like here, type in footer. So I know where my major sections are located quickly because it's highlighted in green. That way I can easily see where the footer tag is located. So notice up here, the only thing I have right now is the body tag. And what I have done is, let's again see it without first. And let's go back here and take a look at refresh. So everything is left justified. So the first thing I want to do is center the entire page, and I want to change the background color. So what I'll do is I'll uncomment the body. So I'm actually basically changing the body. I'm changing the main part of the page. And we'll go ahead and refresh. Now you see everything is blue and everything is centered. And that's not quite what I want, but okay, it's a start. So we have it centered, and we have the alignment by default of the content is centered, and the color is definitely that blue. So now, if you look at the top of the page, notice, as I told you earlier, I have a div tag for each of the major sections, as well as I've got individual paragraphs. So what I want to do is I'm going to collapse these paragraphs so you can see the structure. And there's the footer. Okay, this div tag is the main div tag inside of the body. So if you nest a div tag inside of a body, you could then configure the style rule of the div tag. So what I did was I said, oh, let's make that div tag where the background color is white. So the content itself is going to have a white background. And then the page will still have that blue color. So the page will still have some sort of blue color. And the body will have some sort of white color for the text area. Notice that I've also centered that main white content. Now, let me go ahead and take that out for a moment. I'm going to save it. And if we go back and look, you'll see very quickly that, I save it. There we go. You'll see that the background is now this nice white color. Notice that it's left justified inside of the content area. So, but it's not centered within the body. So we have to actually get that to get centered. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to use a special tag or attribute called margin. And setting this margin to 0 and auto is what's going to do the centering for us. That's probably the hardest thing that people have to realize. So using a combination of margin and text align, we can center the content, and we can also center that content within the page itself. The width, obviously, is the width of that content area of that div tag. And then here's where I left justified the alignment of the page. I've also added some padding, because if I didn't, look what happens. If I save this and I go take a look at it, your padding, your text is going to butt up right next to that line. So you can see how it's nice and centered, but it butt ups and it's kind of ugly. So if you use anything, using this kind of padding is going to help you to prevent that. It's on the inside of the box. So we come back and refresh. Let's go back and there you go. Do a quick refresh. You can see that little padding between the text and the div tag outline, the border of that. So again, very helpful. Now this footer section, we still need to change a little bit because that footer section is not centered. The content, I want that text to be centered. But that's inside of a footer tag. And since the center of the footer tag, I can actually format by using that footer tag and just styling that footer. So again, that footer tag can be stylized just using whatever style properties I want. So I can save that, take a look at that, and do a quick refresh, and you'll see that moves it to the center. Do you see doing it step by step? It might take you a little extra time, but it will actually be better for you in the long run because you'll know everything works. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make my highlight to also be blue. So notice that because I have the blue up here, I also know I have the same blue down here. So I'm going to go ahead and say blue down here. So I know that it's my same blue. Now there are a lot of other ways to deal with colors and to centralize things, but when you're starting out with web programming, understanding the basics is going to be the most important thing. Once you have maintained that, you understand that, then moving to other techniques is certainly reasonable. So right now I've made the heading blue up here, the H1 tag, but the H2 tag is going to stay the same. Even though it's a heading tag, each tag is separate. So H1, H2, H3, H4 are all going to be different. Once in a while you'll see someone put a comma and then H2 because they mean that both H1 and H2 tags would be blue. I certainly could do that, and they both will turn blue. But our specs, in my example, I just did it one color, so I left it like that. Now the bottom part, I want it to be italic, but I'm using italic in the footer for not only the content in French, but also the second paragraph. So I need a way of being able to do both. So I'm setting them equal to a class. And we don't have a real tag here. I'm using a class. So I don't want all of my paragraphs to be italic. If I did, this is what will happen. Let me go ahead and get rid of that. I'm going to change this and show you what happens if I use a p tag. If I use a p tag and I come back everything is going to be italicized. And that's not what I want. What I want is only the footer content. So I'm going to use that class name, and I'm going to precede it with a period. So italic is the class name, and the period represents that it's a class. So then when I save it, anything that has that class assigned to italic will be italicized. So only the bottom 2 lines are going to be italicized. And then lastly, I have another style rule called bold blue. This is another class. Now, I haven't used it in this example, but I certainly can if I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And so you may have style rules that you may or may not use in your site. So it's helpful, again, to kind of put some comments in there to remind you not used. If you're using it or not using it, what it's used for, again, a lot of times we'll simply remove them if they're not being used. But it's up to you. So if I want to make something, for example, the heading section, that section heading right here, I could simply put in class equals. Now what's really nice is, if you notice, that up pops a list of classes that I could be working from. So we know we've got that bold blue, there it is in my list, and it'll automatically then apply that class to my H1 tab. There you go. And it's kind of that greeny blue color. So you're not stuck with it because it's a class. You can just simply remove it like that. There you go. And then you simply save everything. Every time you save something, make sure you save it and then do a quick refresh. There are a couple good tips that you ought to know about. One is, if you have an error like that, where the code kind of got wonky, go back and look at your tags. Make sure that you're using the correct tags and that you haven't a typo. The second is save often, and you can always save backup copies. So if you're ever not sure, save a backup copy. And you can also copy and paste all this code into Notepad in case you're not sure, and then you can always copy back the original if you need to. So that's all I have for page 1. So it didn't take very long. For the first page, I think we spent, about maybe a half hour by the time we got said and done on the discussion, and a half hour on the first page. Okay, so the second page, we are going to have to go ahead and open that up. Okay. And here's our second page. Now, as we scroll down, okay. Okay. Ooh, I'm going to have to change this a little bit. All right, hold on in just a moment. Okay, the second part is going to be a little tricky, which is why I'm giving you these lessons to help you. So the second part is we're going to create a web page called week1-2.html. And it's going to link back to our 1 page because we always want to make sure that people can get there to navigate back and forth. So you should always have links back and forth to each other on every page. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a form, and it's going to have 3 different text boxes that we're going to use as input. And again, take a look at your book on Listing 3-25. It will show you how to insert the form and how to insert the element. Because you guys haven't done really a whole lot of HTML yet and JavaScript, I'm actually in this video going to show you what I did. I know that you can stop, you can screen capture, and you'd still have to type in your code, but this is why I'm giving this to you. I want you to actually practice this and try it out yourself. So I won't give you the files, but you can actually, again, take a look at what I have. But I expect students to try to modify and improve what I have. So what I will need to do is create 3 text boxes using an input tag. The whole point is to collect information from users about the number of items they use and the date. And you need to have a submit button so that they can also submit their form. And we'll need to have a special tag called a form tag that tells you, hey, I have a form that users are filling out. And later on, we'll talk about processing the form. But right now, we just need to create the form. So the second part of this is to create the form itself. So let me go ahead and show you what it looks like. So in the second page, what I suggest people to do is, let me hold on for just a moment. I'm going to go on to Jones. And let me copy from Smith 1 so we save a little bit of time. And we're going to go to Smith and week 1. Okay. So I'm going to take everything from Smith from your first page, and that meets all the requirements. It has a description of the product, it has a hyperlink to a page, and it has a hyperlink to the second page. So everything looks pretty good there. So now we're on week 2. So I don't want to have to redo everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to select everything, we're going to copy it, we're going to go over to our second page, and we're going to paste it. But we know we have to link back to the second one. So what we're going to do is change the link down here to week 1-1. That way it goes back to the first page. It's a super easy way to do it. And the second thing is that I know I'm going to have some extra content. I want my footer to be the same, but all the content above is going to be a little different. It's paragraphs. So I'm going to take these paragraphs out. So all these paragraphs that I have are going to be removed. And I know that I'm going to need to put a form. So I'm going to go ahead and put a form in here somewhere, just so I know that that's what it's going to be. So we have a header section, it has my heading, and I have a form, and I have some sort of footer. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then when I go back, and I'll need to take a look at that in my browser, that's what the page looks like. Week 1 is pretty well finished. Let's go ahead and take a look at that one. There's week 1. And then we can go back to week 2, and we'll have just the basic skeleton. Okay. Now, let's go and take a look at the code that we're going to create and how it's going to work. So the first thing that we're going to do is, there you go, nope, there. Up at the top, notice that I've added a, wrong one, 1-2, okay. All right, so everything looks pretty much the same at the top. We've got a title. We have our nice little style sheet up at the top. Okay, nothing fancy. I have some JavaScript that I'm holding off on talking about. I have my nice heading section up here. And here's a nice little paragraph, tells you something about being purchased. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that because that's kind of a nice thing to have some information there. So we'll just have a little paragraph telling you information about how to fill out the form, or maybe some directions are very helpful. So now we're going to go back to the next part, which is the form. And there's 2 parts. So let me go through and paste this, and then we're going to talk about how it works. Okay. So, number 1, forms always begin with a beginning form tag and a closing form tag. That's important. Now, inside of the form tag, if we click on it, you'll see that there are all these different attributes that could come up and different methods. Most of the time, we'll be working with attributes. So, for example, there's one called ID, and we could give a unique identifier for the form. There's also one called action, and action would tell us what we're going to do or what page is going to process that form. And notice that the help and the IntelliSense that pops up kind of gives you a guide as you're coding your page, which is very helpful. You also have things like method. You might have heard of post versus get when you took a networking class. It's the same kind of thing. We're identifying how are we sending our data to the actual web server. So form with a get, it means it's going to add the name and value pairs up in the address bar. If it's post, it's going to attach it with the request. So again, it's just giving you some ideas of some of the attributes that are there. You also can go over to the properties window. Anytime you're on any tag, all of the attributes you're going to work with can show up inside of the properties window. So again, depending upon what you're working with, you may actually want to use the properties window. Again, it just depends on your what you're doing. So right now we're going to just work on the code manually. So inside of the form, I have a paragraph, and again, it's not required, but it's helpful for aligning your content all together and grouping it together. Sometimes I use a div tag to group it together instead of a paragraph. So I might come in here and say div instead of a paragraph tag. It's just some sort of element in case I want to maybe place a border around my form or color the background of the form. It's helpful to have some sort of block element to do that. So inside of the form will be the labels and the text boxes or whatever form fields I'm working with. So there is a tag called a label tag. Now the label tag is kind of an interesting tag. It's possible that I just simply type in label and then I have the closing label tag here. And then I have the input tag afterward. I could certainly do that. And this is the label for my text box, and then here's my input tag, which will create my text box. But your author uses a different technique, which is to put the input tag inside of the label tag. That's also acceptable. So again, there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to go ahead and stay with the way your author did it, but I want you to recognize that there are different ways to do this. So the label is basically the text that's being displayed. Now the input tag is what's used to create the text box. And there are many kinds of input elements out there. We have drop-down lists, we have radio buttons, we have check boxes, we have text boxes, we have password text boxes, we have hidden fields. There are all kinds of different form fields we have. The input is used to create most of them. So the input, when we're dealing with a text box, it's a single line. If you want a multiple line, there's a text box called text area. So again, for the most part, we'll be using input, but there are other elements we'll also use. So notice that it says type equals text. So this tells you it's a basic text box. Every element needs to have a unique ID associated with it. Now, you could put a name in there and use the name attribute, but the problem with the name attribute is that it really is not uniquely identifying that form field. We really want a unique ID because later we need to retrieve that value, and the only way we really want to do it is based upon the ID. If we do it based on name, it's possible that other elements of the page could have the same name, and then you're having issues of having to parse out the array of values that can come back. It's much too time consuming. It's a lot easier if you just simply give it a unique ID to start with. Notice that I'm giving it a descriptive name. I don't want to see anything like text box 1, text box 2, text box 3. Those are generic and they're not helpful. We want descriptive, self-describing documentation as much as possible. Notice that I have an autofocus, which means that when the page loads, it will automatically focus the cursor directly into this text box. So again, it's very user-friendly. And I also have an access key. So people who need to access forms, they can actually identify a key, they can press, and they can enter the value directly. So again, many of you are from military. I think you'll understand that I'm a big proponent for accessibility for not only wounded warriors, but anybody who has any kind of accessibility needs. So having access keys and autofocus included is very important to me. And then again, it doesn't have a closing tag that we really work with, so we're going to use a / just to indicate, hey, our tag is closed. Let's move on to the next tag. And then I put some line breaks. I put 2 line breaks at the end. I did the same thing with delivery date, and right now I have it as input type equals text. Number of items, again, I'm using type equals text, so it's a text box. And then I have a gift card message. Now my gift card message could be more than 1 line. So I'm using a new tag called a text area. This gives you multiple lines of text that you can add. And what's different is that I need to tell it how many rows I want my text area to be and how many columns across do I want it to be. And then you can actually put some default content in there by just simply saying put whatever the content you want in between the beginning tag and that closing tag here. So unlike the input tags, we can actually put some default content inside that text area. Now, it is possible to put some default content inside the input tags. We use a tag called a placeholder to do that, an attribute called a placeholder. But for right now, we'll just leave it the way it is. And then down here, we have a hidden / form. In other words, you can't actually see the text box. It's hidden, which means that I have to pass a value because the user can't type anything in. So I'm passing the word yellow. Again, it could be a customer ID or whatever you want to pass. So right now I'm calling customer preference is the color yellow. Okay, last is we have an input. After the input, we want a button that you can click on and have something happen. So this button doesn't need to have an ID, but it does have to have some sort of event that's going to be associated with our function. So we're going to work with the click event. There are a couple of other events that we could be working with, but mostly with buttons we're talking about click events, when somebody clicks on the button. So when you click on the button, this onClick attribute is used to identify the function that you want to call when the button is clicked. So onClick equals will then pass the name of the function you're going to work with. Now I'm working with a function called calculate total. This is the name of the function that we're going to create. Notice that after I call a function, I'm using a semicolon and I'm saying return false. I'm doing that because I don't want this form actually being processed. I want it just to say, hey, don't do anything. Just do my JavaScript, and when you're done with this method, this function, then I want you to stop. Okay, don't actually process it. And then the value, which is going to be in the button displayed, is the text that's between the two buttons here. Again, there's a lot of ways to do this, but this is the easy way and the way the book shows you. Now, the last thing you need is you need to have a place to put the results. So I'm giving you a paragraph. We're going to put all this information in a paragraph. So they fill out the form. We're going to retrieve the value with our JavaScript function called calculate total, and then we're going to populate that paragraph with the values from the user entered by referencing this results, which is the ID of that paragraph. So this is where that information is going to go. You can even put a little comment in here. Form results go here. Okay, something along those lines. So now we're going to go ahead and save this, and when you take a look at it, it's not going to work, but you'll at least get to look at your form. So it's helpful to see this. Now notice our form right here, nothing is lined up. That's okay for right now, we're fine with that. When you place the order, nothing really happens because we don't have that JavaScript actually working yet. So we need to move to part 2, which is creating the JavaScript. Okay, so we're going to be done soon. We're at the last part, which is how do you work on the JavaScript. So you take a look down here. You see that you'll need to create a program that's embedded JavaScript. All right, not external. This is embedded. This means it's embedded into the page itself, and so it's only accessible by this particular page. Now, we need to, first of all, create a function that will be called the same thing that we passed it on the button. So I'm going to call mine calculate total. And it's going to be based on that onClick event handler. So you want to take a look at, again, whenever I mention listing, make sure you take a look at that listing information. All right, now, the JavaScript program that we need to do is going to do several things. So what I like to do is I often, when I'm coding, I will use those comments and I will put this information into my page, and every time I do something, then I will remove it from my list so that I know that I'm attacking each thing I'm required. So the first thing we need to do is increase the script tags in the head section. And so I'm going to go up here in the head section in my page, way up here. And I'll go right after my style sheet, so somewhere around there. And we'll need to include script tags. Now notice with the script tag, we actually have access to all kinds of things. There's one called language, that we could say language equals JavaScript, but by default it is JavaScript. So I'm just going to leave it as just script. Okay. Now, then you want to actually inside of there, you want to create a function called calculate total. And then inside that function, you need to retrieve the user's name, information, and all that fun stuff. So what we're going to have to do is think about it this way. You create a function, retrieve the information, then we need to have some way to get the information and process it and store it. So they're going to have you create an object called myData. And we're going to store all the information inside of this data object. So we'll have a customer name, the date, the number of items is all stored inside of myData as almost like an array but it's all associated with an object instead of just an array object. It's called just a generic object. And then we'll need to take those values that are in that particular object and then use them. In this case, we're just going to create a calculation of the total order and the shipping and tax based upon some values that I'm giving you. Then when we're all finished, we'll come back and we'll format the data. So let's take a look at the solution of how this all works and talk about that. Then we'll come back and talk about the formatting. So let's take a look at the parts that have to do with each individual part. So we have to create our function, and this is how we're going to do this. So in the script tag, okay, there you go. We have a variable called calculate total. Now, in some places, you'll see them create a function using function keyword, and then they'll call it calculate total. I'm going to call mine 1 because I already have a function. And then you'll have something like that. And that's typical. We do have this. This is perfectly acceptable. But sometimes it's helpful to have a variable to call instead of for that function. And so what we'll do is we'll create a variable that represents that particular function. So we are creating that in a slightly different way, but it's the same meaning. So in this function, we need a variable called message. This is the message displayed to the end user. I also think it's helpful for debugging to have a message defined as well. And then we have an object, and that object is going to be called myData. And we're going to have several variables that are properties of that object. One is customer name, one is delete data, or deliver data, number of items, maybe customer preference, maybe a gift card if we want. Whatever variables we want include, you identify the variable, which is our property, and then a semicolon. So it becomes something like property, colon, and value is what we're doing. And in between each one, you're going to have a comma, like that. So here's a property, colon, here would be the value. Property, colon, value, comma. Now, the value, we are actually retrieving from the form. So the way we retrieve it, if you remember I told you earlier, is we're going to use getElementById to retrieve value, because we want to retrieve the value from the form fields. The document just means we're getting it from the web page. There's some element in the page with this particular ID. That's why we needed them all to be unique. So full name is the name that we use in our form. Delivery date is the name we used in our form, and number of items is the name we used in our form, and so on and so on. The idea here is that you can come up with as many as you like. The last one does not have a comma. So always make sure last value does not have a comma. Okay? Now you'll notice that you have to close this object because you started with the curly braces. You have to close it with the curly braces, and don't forget your closing semicolon. A lot of times people forget this, and that's where their error is. Okay? So there's my function. All right, so my variable defined, and I have my function. All right, let's go back to the next part. That takes care of step 1, 2, and step 3, and step 4, 5, 6, and 7. Super easy. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to get into the calculation. We know the price per item, we know the tax rate, and we know the shipping rate. Now it's helpful to have these as variables because, again, we can change the value anytime, and we wouldn't have to change order code, we would just change the variable code. And after we're done, we'll need to calculate using the shipping and tax information. So if you take a look at this, I want to take a look at the formula that we're going to use. Okay, this is all inside the function. Okay, very important, all inside the function. So notice that I have included a comment saying that this is where I'm processing my calculations. So I retrieve the data information from this object by simply using object.property. So you retrieve it using object.property, just like you do with any other language that you're dealing with, like that. Okay. So we're going to retrieve data for the price or set it, either retrieve or set. In this case, we're going to get the price, and it's going to be based upon my data, number of items, which is this value here, times 4.25, because that's the number of price per item. So the total price of everything I have is based upon the number of items times the price of the individual item. So that's our total price that we have to pay. Now I could have said cost or total amount. Again, I just called it price because that was my variable. You could call it whatever you want. So it's adding a new variable to the My Data object. The tax is going to be based on the price, that's the amount we're paying, times 7%. Okay. And then shipping is going to take the price times 2%. And now we have to add them all together. So my order total is my price plus my tax plus my shipping. Now, of course, you have all kinds of things for converting data and maybe using integers or decimals. JavaScript kind of works kind of funky, so you want to take a look at Chapter 3 for issues with syntax. But for right now, let's keep it simple, and that way we don't have to do much conversions here as far as data types. So what we'll need to do is, after we're done with my calculation, I need to format the data and have it look nice for the end user. So if it comes out to $10.40, we need to make sure it says 1040, not 10.4. So we're going to need to use a built-in method called toFixed. Notice that I've added in the homework assignments, I add sometimes URLs. Now these URLs usually are pretty good, but once in a while the W3 will change them. So keep in mind if they do, just go and look for that page, it'll be there. They have not removed any pages that I know of. So here it gives you an idea of exactly what you might work with and any properties exactly that you might need. So here's the toFixed example of toFixed of how it would work. So in this example, we're going to go ahead and format the data. So let's take a look at the formatting. Again, we're going to come down here, and you'll see that we need to create it as fixed. Now I did it kind of together, so my order total, every time I display any value from shipping to price, I will add period toFixed and then in parentheses 2. And the 2 represents the number of decimal places for our fixed number. So price, tax, shipping, and order total all have toFixed included for my formatting. So my message, I create the output message and format the data at the same time using toFixed for currency. And you'll notice I do have to add in the $sign because it's not a monetary value, it's just simply a fixed value, a decimal. So as you notice, we're going to take the variable message, which we created earlier, and we're going to concatenate using the plus sign. So we're going to concatenate our message saying thank you, the customer name for their order, provide a couple line breaks, and notice again the pattern. When I code, I like to have the pluses on the left-hand side, or I will have them all on the right-hand side, but I never mix and match, because this way I can see that all my pluses are in order, and that way I know if there's any issues. Don't forget, in some cases you'll have to include a blank space before the quote, or possibly a blank space before that closing quote up here, so that it all looks nice, and that's important for your output. Once you're finished with that, you'll also want to make sure that you have a nice message. So maybe I add the color preference information. I continue to concatenate. Now I could use the plus equal sign to simply add to it. Again, it's very helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and save everything. I'm going to go ahead and view it in the browser. So you can type in John Smith, delivery date, I don't know, 1.1.2018. Number of items, I will buy 10. And we can put in happy birthday as my message and place my order. Notice it says, thank you, John Smith, for your order. You will receive 10 items delivered to you on, there's the date, total price of the order. Again, the tax and the shipping are all formatted nicely. The total order is $46. Customer color preference is yellow. And the gift card will say, happy birthday. So here's my nice output. So how did I do that? I took the message and I assigned it to the results. That was that div tag. If you take a look at that div tag at the bottom of the page, or in this case I made a paragraph, could be paragraph or div tag, but I set it to results, and that's the key. So what you'll do is you'll go use the results, period, and then inner HTML. Make sure that the HTML is capitalized because JavaScript is case sensitive. Star that in your notes because it's super important. It is case sensitive. Any typo will cause an error, so keep that in mind. So we'll assign that to the message, and the message will be output. I did want to show you that sometimes what we'll do is we'll use a alert window, alert, and we'll pass message to the alert box. This is used often for debugging. And what that does is when I come back here and I quick refresh, I have to fill it out again. I'll just put in John, delivery date 1/1/2018, and number of items 10. I'll just put in happy birthday. Okay, and when we place the order, we'll get an alert message. Notice that all those line breaks are showing up because literally it will type out whatever you put there into the alert box. So it's not as pretty as it would be as if it's in the web page. But this is very helpful for debugging because it will show you literally what's going to be sent to the web page. So if you can get it there, then at least you know that your code for your JavaScript above is okay. Then your issue is probably with where your script is placed. That means it may have to be placed at the top of the page before the page is loaded. In some cases, some script tags are placed at the bottom of the page. And because your page hasn't loaded, when you're trying to insert this HTML, it's not going to work. So keep that in mind as you are coding, that the location of the script tags can make a difference in terms of why your code is loading, not coding. So that's really your homework assignment for the first one. So we display the results to the user and it will look something like this. You can also use document.write as well because that also will work. So if you wanted to, you could use the document.write. Notice how I'm commenting these out because it's really helpful to try out different techniques to test things out. So let's see. Yep, there it is. All right, save everything. Go back out to my browser. Notice that you have to do a refresh and you have to fill it out again. It's because we're working client side. Now remember, this is literally going to type out whatever you type in. And we'll just go ahead and click on place my order. Notice that it wrote it out, but it didn't show anything else in the page. It's because when you use document.write, it literally will write that out. If I look at my source code, I have no HTML, I have nothing. It literally has just that code and that's it. And that's one of the reasons why it's a useful thing for debugging, but it's not really the best in terms of outputting it for the end user. So a lot of times we'll just assign it to the individual element, like the results element, for that reason. So that's one of the differences between writing it out to the page and using document.write, which just simply writes it to a page but doesn't write any of the other HTML code that we need. So our skeleton code is missing if we use document.write. Doesn't mean we don't use it. We use it a lot for pop-up windows and things like that. So that's pretty much it. Everything else I think is done. And then you go ahead and save that. Look at the bottom. It says format your content with HTML. A lot of students forget this. So I've gone through the basic structure. So now you can do things like add commenting, add headings, add links, make it yours. And this is the key. If you want an A in your assignment, you will need to play with HTML. So go out there and take a look at it, maybe add a class or two or some style rules. So try to improve upon the appearance of the page. My page right now is pretty bare. As far as content, I put a couple of paragraphs, but that's pretty much it. So the idea here is page 1 and page 2, you want to modify it and try to make it your own. So try to improve it. You could add some pictures, you could add all kinds of stuff into your page. Again, as formatting with cascading style rules, I'm asking that you, again, think about creating inline style rules with at least 3 elements. An embedded style rule, it means at the top of the page with at least 3 style elements. I've shown you a couple. And at least 2 classes. Again, trying them out, making sure they work. And then here are all the different style rules that are useful. And so what I'm trying to get you to do is to use them because these are the kinds of things that are on your final exam. So by using this stuff now in your homework, you'll find that you'll do much better on the final exam having used what they are. So if you want to change the font color of something, you could come in here and say, all right, I want to change the font color of the H2 tag. I showed you could use a class, but I could come in here and say, okay, I want to change it using a style attribute, and it would equal, and we would say font color. Notice how IntelliSense will pick it up, and we'll use the semicolon, and then we'll pick a color. Now I happen to know red is FF0000 along those lines. And always make sure you have your semicolon inside of the quote. So this is how we would then modify the font color for our particular, or not color, font color for our font. If you want a font family or any other font's characteristics, there's a font family equal quote, and then maybe we want it colon, let's do Arial. Now notice that if it's got a space in it, you have to use single quotes around that font name. Otherwise it won't work. If it's Times New Roman, see how Times New Roman? You have to use those single quotes or it won't work. Those spaces will not show up. So again, keep that in mind as you go forward. And don't forget those semicolons at the end of each of your style rules. So you could chain these together very easily. Then when you save it, we could even add a font size. Let's add a font size. Let's make this really big. Font dash size. And we'll make ours 18 points. Something like that. All right, now when we go back to review our page and do a quick refresh, are we on 1-2, and we need to make sure we're on the right page. There you go. Notice how it's red. It's a little bit larger, and it's Times New Roman. I want to make it and change it for Donna. Again, you don't need the single quotes, but we'll go ahead and do that. Go back, do a quick refresh. Now you can see it's Verdana. So the idea here is pick something that makes your web page look good, easy to read, easy to navigate, easy to follow, good use of white space and color, and lay out your content. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget your documentation, and make sure you use good naming convention for your form name, all the attributes, any comments that you add, all those are important. Make sure you have correct nesting. That's pretty much it. Now, when you're finished, I want you to create a Word document. The reason why I have you do a Word document, again, you should name it with the same thing, like, homework1.docx. And then what you do is take a screenshot of your code. So go out to your web page, take a screenshot. I use a product called Jing, J-I-N-G, and I get it from TechSmith. And you go ahead and grab a a quick screenshot of your code, something like that. So I can see what your page looked like in the browser. You can capture it, you can simply save it, or you can copy it and then put it into your Microsoft Word document. That way I can see what it looks like. Now, in that page, if your pages are huge, you might have to compress them down. But if I can't see it, and it's all blurry, then obviously don't compress them all the way down. Compress them a small amount. If you do it for sending email, it compresses it significantly. But you'll have to justify it and take a look at what you have and determine which is best to compress it. I do need to be able to see it to give you credit, so keep that in mind. So any pictures that you send, make sure that they're not huge files, but you want to make sure that they're readable. And you can add in your code as well. The only reason why you add it is for perhaps that you made a mistake and I can't see anything, I can't run anything. That has happened once in a while, so occasionally having your code in the Word document can help as well. But basically just copy and paste it and make sure that it's a very small font, like a size 9 or 10, just so that I can see it. And that will help as well. But the idea here is that you can easily see the code and your image in case there is an error on your page. It's really a backup for you. The one requirement I do have is that when you're all finished, you come out to your File Explorer when you're finished, go to your desktop, wherever you have your folder, right-click on your folder, and select Compress With. Now the problem is, watch, I'm going to do Compress With. It's going to go ahead and make my folder. When I double-click on this, and I click on Extract, watch what happens. If I extract it, it's going to extract into that folder, which I've already created. It'll extract into that folder. So let me go ahead and take this. I'm going to pretend by going into a new folder. I'm going to call it Homework 1. Because most of the time I download your file and I stick it into a homework folder. So I'm going to download your file, your zip file, and I'm going to put it right into Homework 1. So I've downloaded your zip file. I click on your name. I click on Extract. And I'm going to go right into that homework folder. Okay. I should see inside of that homework folder something called CS240 Jones. So you can see that there is your folder. And now when I grade it, I can go into that folder, I can go into Pages, and I can simply double click on the page like that, and up will pop your page, and your links should work. So if you're not sure, test your pages this way, because this is how I grade them. And that's it. So again, you can take a look at the individual pages. You can review this. You can stop the video and screenshot and take a look at the sample code. The JavaScript, I'm looking at trying to have you guys test it out just so that you have an idea of where JavaScript fits in the big picture. We will go much more into HTML the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll get much more into cascading style sheets, and then weeks 4, 5, and 6, and 7 we'll be spending time on JavaScript. So if there are any questions, please let me know in my inbox. And again, looking at the criteria, just to give you an idea, I'm looking at, did you create all your items? Did you create all the folders? Is your folder structure correct? Do you have the form and all the elements, that there's no errors when it gets processed? But if you don't create all of them, maybe you missed something, you could still get a good score. You could still get 80% on that section, because if you created most of them or most of the content, I will give you 80. So you can get between an A and a B depending upon whether or not you get it all correctly, or if you got most of it correctly, you can still get a really good grade. Where you're going to get low grades in this class is if you have missing items. If you have a significant amount, you've missed half of the form, or you haven't done parts of the, so maybe you had the form but you skipped the JavaScript. If you didn't even try it, or if you had so many errors that you just didn't do anything, that's where you're going to get 60%. If you have nothing done, you'll get nothing. But I try to give you some credit if you've done something. So most students will score anywhere between 8 on average each week. If they're having difficulty, but they can still score very well by adding content, making sure you have documentation. So here is where you score a lot of points. So if you have your proper nesting, your documentation, making sure you identify sources of your images, all of that HTML documentation, and all the documentation in your style sheets and JavaScript, that gives you a lot of points. So it helps to buffer, especially when you get your final exam grade. So keep that in mind, that you'll want to pay attention to this first column, because I'm really looking at, did you create all the elements and did you go above and beyond? So in the assignment up here, when I said go back and format your content and play around with the HTML and CSS, that's what I'm looking for. So that's going to distinguish between an A, B, and a C on this particular homework. So expect to spend at least a half an hour on the first page for home and the week 1-1. When you get to week 1-2, you should copy the code from the first page to the second. That'll save you some time. Then you'll need to make your form. Again, that should take you maybe about 15 minutes to make the actual form. And the JavaScript will take you longer. It might take you a half hour to an hour, just because you're testing each part of it. And then again, another hour to work with the style sheets and maybe adding some content and improving your appearance of the overall site. So it should take you a good 3 to 4 hours easily for the discussion and the homework together, which is pretty normal for this class. If it's taking you a lot of time, in other words, if you are stuck and you're spending 3 hours on one line of code, that's a problem. You should not be doing that. If you're stuck on one line of code and you can't get it to work, comment it out and go off to another step, and then come back. You can also contact me through my inbox. However, if you're going to ask me a question, I may not be able to answer it unless I have your entire code. So you might want to zip your project, your folder up, and then send me that zip file, because that way I can actually look at your code and help you actually identify where the problem is to help you troubleshoot. Troubleshooting takes a couple weeks to do and to feel like you're proficient, but it will happen. But it is something that will be stressful for some of you because you may not feel comfortable with not getting it right the first time. In this class, you will not always get it right. That's just part of learning. So what is a good thing is learning how to debug and learning how to critique your own work, is to also learn how to work with others and to get input. So if you have questions, make sure you ask them. If you spend more than 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a problem or part of a problem, then it's probably you're in the wrong direction. And then don't forget, you can always go out to the w3schools.com, because they have an excellent section on forms. So I might as well just go ahead and show it to you right now. Go take a look at the HTML, and if you look at the section there, you can see all the different tags, and down here you have a section on forms, and it also talks about input types, the input element. So you can see where it has the first name and text box. You can also look for text area and other elements. It'll also have some other information there. So again, this is a great website to take a look at it. When you actually process the form, there are actually help in the JavaScript website. You can also take a look here. So right here it says JS forms. It'll actually talk about processing forms, validating forms, things like that. And we'll get more into this in another class. I just wanted to show you that there is help out there. Cascading style sheet, all of the elements that you're interested in, like colors, backgrounds, borders, all the different attributes that we were talking about are here. So if you want to know how to insert color or maybe a background for a page, instead of doing blue, you can use background image instead of background color. So again, feel free to check out this website for additional help. All right, I hope you had a good day for the first week and enjoyable. And if you have any questions, come see me in my inbox. Have a great day.